The desert wind carried dust across the small town of Dry Creek, a place where laws were thin and mercy was rare. Every sound echoed through the dry air. The creak of a wooden sign, the distant bark of a dog, and the rattle of wagon wheels. The town gathered near the old saloon that day, not for celebration, but for something darker. Inside a corral behind the saloon, a frightened young man stood with his wrists tied. His name was Eli, barely 20, a quiet farmhand who had worked hard all his life but owned nothing. His clothes were worn and his face pale from fear. The man who had caught him, a cruel ranch owner named Holt, shouted to the crowd that Eli owed him money and that he would sell him to recover it. The crowd didn't care much for justice. Some laughed, others drank and waited to see who would make the first bid. To them, Eli was just another poor soul in a world where power ruled everything. His eyes searched the faces around him, but no one met his gaze. No one dared to help. Among the people watching was a woman standing at the back. She wore a long dark dress and a black hat that shaded her face from the sun. Her name was Clara. She was a widow who lived on a small ranch a few miles out of town. Her husband had died in a mining accident 2 years earlier, leaving her with a little land and too many debts. Since then, people had treated her like she was invisible, just another lonely woman in the West. But Clara wasn't heartless. When she looked at Eli, something inside her stirred. His trembling hands, his soft voice when he begged for mercy, reminded her of the good man she had lost. She saw in his eyes the same innocence her husband once carried before life had broken him. The auction began. Holt started shouting numbers, his voice loud and ugly. Men in the crowd tossed coins, laughing as if it were a game. Eli's voice cracked when he said he hadn't done anything wrong. Holt ignored him. "Debt's a debt," he said. "And someone's got to pay." Clara stepped closer. Her heart pounded. She knew what it meant to interfere. Holt was a powerful man and no one crossed him. But when she saw Eli flinch as Holt raised a whip to scare him, she couldn't stand still anymore. Her voice cut through the air, soft but steady. "I'll pay the debt," she said. The laughter stopped. Every head turned toward her. The men stared, surprised that a woman had spoken up, especially Clara. Holt sneered. "You widow? You can barely feed your horse. How'll you pay me?" Clara took off her small leather pouch and poured out every coin she had. It wasn't much, but her voice stayed calm. "It's all I got." "And it's enough for him to walk free?" Holt smirked. "Not near enough. But maybe I'll make a deal," he said. His tone turned cold. "You take him in. He works off the rest on your land. He's yours till the debt's paid," the crowd murmured. Some thought she was foolish. Others whispered that she must be desperate for company. Clara ignored them all. She stepped forward, met Holt's cruel smile with quiet strength, and said, "Fine, I'll take him." Holt cut the rope around Eli's wrists, shoving him toward her. "He's your problem now." Eli stumbled, confused, his voice weak. "Ma'am, you don't have to." She stopped him gently. "I already did," she said. As they left the crowd behind, the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the town in gold. Eli walked beside her, still in shock. He couldn't understand why she had done it. People in Dry Creek didn't risk themselves for others. He kept his head down, afraid to speak. On the trail back to her ranch, the silence between them grew heavy. The wind picked up dust, brushing across their faces. Finally, Clara spoke. "You don't owe me anything," she said quietly. "But I can use another pair of hands around the ranch." Eli nodded. "I'll work hard, ma'am. I promise." "I know you will," she replied. When they reached her ranch, the sky had turned red and purple. The small wooden house stood alone, surrounded by dry grass and tired fences. It wasn't much, but it was safe. She gave him water and bread, and for the first time that day, he smiled a little. That night, Clara sat by the fire, staring into the flames. She thought about what she had done. Her savings were gone, and the town would talk. But deep down, she didn't regret it. There was something about Eli, something pure in the way he looked at the world. Even after everything, Eli, meanwhile, sat on the porch, listening to the night sounds, the coyotes, the whispering wind, the crackle of the fire inside. He had never known kindness like this. For the first time since his parents died, he felt safe. Days turned into weeks. Eli worked hard, fixing fences, hauling water, and caring for the horses. He was quiet but steady, never complaining, always polite. Clara watched him grow stronger, his face losing that frightened look. Slowly, the ranch began to come alive again, but Dry Creek wasn't done with them yet. Holt didn't like being made a fool of. He began spreading rumors that the widow had bought herself a boy to keep her company. People whispered behind her back, and when Eli went into town for supplies, men laughed at him. Still, Clara held her head high. She had seen worse than gossip. She reminded Eli not to listen to them. "You know the truth," she said. "That's all that matters." Eli nodded, though his eyes burned with shame. He wanted to protect her, but he was just one young man in a world ruled by men like Holt. One evening, after another long day, the sun sank low over the hills. Clara found Eli sitting on the fence watching the light fade. She walked over and stood beside him. Neither spoke for a while. The air smelled of dry grass and smoke. "You saved me," he said finally, his voice soft. "I don't understand why." Clara looked at him, her eyes warm but sad. "Because once someone saved me too," she said. "And I couldn't let the world take another good soul." The wind moved through the field, carrying her words like a promise. For the first time since that terrible day, Eli felt something new. A quiet strength, born not from pride or anger, but from gratitude. He knew his debt was more than money now. It was something he could never repay, except by standing beside her when the world turned cruel again. And in Dry Creek, that day would come soon. The days that followed brought both peace and danger to Clara's quiet ranch. For a short time, life almost felt normal again. Eli woke before dawn each morning, working hard to keep the ranch running. Clara noticed how determined he had become, fixing things that had been broken for years, fences, wells, even the broken barn door that her late husband had once promised to repair. He worked with quiet strength, never complaining, always respectful. The gossip from town still reached them through travelers and traders. People whispered that Clara had lost her mind to risk her home for a stranger. Some said Eli had tricked her. Others said worse. But Clara didn't care. She had made her choice with her own heart, and she stood by it. Eli tried to ignore the rumors too, though they hurt him deeply. He couldn't understand why good deeds always drew cruelty from others. One cold morning, Clara found Eli out by the corral, feeding the horses. He looked up at her, smiling slightly despite the chill. "They say winter's coming early," he said. She nodded. "Then we better be ready." Together they worked to store hay and patch the roof. She admired his spirit, the way he faced the hard world with quiet courage. But far across the dry plains, Holt wasn't finished with his cruelty. He sat in the saloon one night, drinking with his men, anger burning in his chest. Clara's defiance had humiliated him in front of everyone. He had sworn that no one would make a fool of him and get away with it. As the firelight flickered on his scarred face, he told his men he wanted the boy back, or he wanted the widow ruined. They laughed and nodded, knowing Holt's word was law in Dry Creek. Days later, a stranger rode up to Clara's ranch. He was tall, with a long coat and eyes sharp as glass. He said he was looking for work, but Eli didn't trust him. Clara, kind as always, offered him a meal. The man watched them both closely, his words soft, but his gaze cold. That night, Eli heard horses in the distance and saw the man ride away under the moon. He knew trouble was coming. The next evening, as the sky turned orange, a cloud of dust rose near the ridge. Riders, 4, maybe 5, heading straight for the ranch. Clara saw them too. She didn't need to ask who they were. Holt's men had come. She stood on the porch, her hand trembling slightly as she looked at the horizon. Eli stepped beside her. "Get inside," he said firmly. "Let me talk to them." But Clara shook her head. "This is my land," she said quietly. "I won't hide from them." When the riders reached the yard, Holt was among them, his grin twisted and mean. "Well, if it isn't the brave widow," he said. "I'm here for what's mine." "You've been paid," Clara said. "You got every coin I had." Holt laughed. "That debt wasn't money, sweetheart. The boy belongs to me. You can't just buy decency, not in this town." Eli stepped forward. "I'm not yours," he said, his voice steady. "You sold me fair. You lost." The men around Holt laughed, but Holt's eyes turned dark. "Big words for a boy I could break in half." He turned to Clara. You can hand him over, or I'll take your ranch too. The wind blew dust between them. Clara's heart pounded, but she didn't move. You'll take nothing from me, she said calmly. Leave now, Holt. You've done enough harm. Holt dismounted, stepping closer, his boots crushing the dry earth. You think the law's gonna save you? The sheriff works for me. Out here, I make the rules. Eli's jaw tightened. Then maybe it's time someone broke them. He didn't raise his fists. He didn't need to. There was something in his eyes, quiet strength, not anger, that made even Holt hesitate for a moment. Then before Holt could speak, one of his men muttered, Boss, maybe we should leave. This ain't worth it. But Holt snarled. Shut up. He reached for his gun, but Clara's hand moved faster. The sound of a rifle cocking froze everyone. She held her late husband's rifle steady, the barrel aimed at Holt's chest. I buried one good man already, she said, her voice low but steady. I won't bury another because of you. Silence hung heavy in the air. Even the horses seemed still. Holt's eyes flicked between her and Eli, calculating. Then he spat on the ground. You'll regret this, widow. He mounted his horse and rode off, his men following, leaving dust swirling behind them. When they were gone, Clara lowered the rifle slowly. Her hands shook. Eli stepped closer, his eyes full of worry. You could have been killed. She looked at him, her voice soft. So could you. But sometimes, standing up is the only thing left to do. After that night, things changed. The town learned what had happened, and though some mocked them, others began to respect them quietly. A few good people started bringing supplies, small gestures of kindness in a place where kindness was rare. Winter came, and with it, hardship. The snow fell thick and heavy. Eli worked day and night to keep the animals fed and the fires burning. Clara often watched him from the window, realizing how much the boy had grown since the day she met him, not just in strength, but in spirit. One night, as the fire crackled, Eli sat by the table fixing a lantern. When spring comes, he said, I'll move on. Find work somewhere else. You've done enough for me. Clara looked at him quietly. You think leaving is what I want? She asked. He looked confused. You've done more for me than anyone ever has. I can't keep taking from you. She smiled faintly. Eli, this ranch isn't what it used to be. But with you here, it feels alive again. You've given me something I thought I'd lost. Hope. He lowered his gaze. The firelight danced in his eyes. You gave me my life back, he said softly. The months passed, and spring finally arrived. The snow melted, revealing green shoots across the hills. Dry Creek began to change, too. Holt's grip weakened after the townsfolk turned against him. One day, word spread that he had left for good, heading south and leaving his empire behind. Clara and Eli stood by the corral one morning, watching the horses run free in the open field. The sky was clear, the air full of promise. She turned to him with a gentle smile. Looks like the world's giving us another chance. Eli nodded. Maybe it's time to build something new. And together, they did. The ranch grew strong again, not because of wealth or power, but because of trust. The kind born when two broken souls stand together against a cruel world. In the heart of the Wild West, where greed often won and good hearts were few, a widow and a young man had done the impossible. They had chosen mercy over fear, courage over silence, and in doing so, they had saved each other. And though the world would forget their names, the wind over Dry Creek would never forget the day a desperate young man found freedom, and a lonely widow found her reason to live again.